Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here today on this December 16th, 2021. I am Nick Kanoki, the Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm excited for our conversation today with Boyd Beal. Before we get that underway, I just want to thank our patron sponsors, Definitive Logic, Onuma System, ABS Quality Evaluations, and ABS Group, as well as our organizational members, of which you can see there are many. So if you're interested in joining the ranks, please reach out to anyone at the ALN and we will talk about how we can work together. Lastly, before we get going, if you're out there watching, we would love to hear from you. So please send any comments, questions, or feedback to the chat, and we will put those questions to Boyd. And otherwise, Jim, take us away.
Hey, super. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so welcome, Boyd. It's good to have you here today.
It's always nice to meet with you.
It's good.
It's been a while, though.
It has. So tell people where you're calling from today.
Well, I'm calling from Augusta, Georgia. And it's a little drizzly and a little cold down here for us. And you're calling from outside in Virginia, and it looks nice. I can't believe it. That's golfing weather.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You'd be golfing. You're here, 65 degrees.
Would.
You know, I'm up on the top of the mountain. At a family cabin, and it's beautiful. Yeah. Nice.
Yep.
That's good. Well, so Boyd, we met at an IMC conference. How many years ago was that? 7 years ago, maybe something.
What was it? 2015.
15. 6 years ago. Wow, that's good. So we usually start with an origin story question. So how'd you get into asset management? How'd that get you to where you are today?
Well,
in 30 seconds or less.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case.
Just kidding.
Actually, as you well know, there aren't too many entry-level EAM people. You pretty much had to work in all the different departments to really get a grasp of what enterprise asset management's about. And as such, I worked in a lot of different industries. And while I was working with Fluor Global Services, I was lucky enough to get on their asset productivity improvement team. And, they had a really good philosophy for tier 2 companies anyway, and tier 3, wherein they looked at reliability, planning and scheduling, and materials management. Those are the 3 things they looked at. Mm-hmm. And they also asked us to work with change management. Well, I embraced change management. I mean, to me, it's just like the golden rule: you treat people the way you want to be treated. But not everybody embraces it, And I always like the approach of being the voice in the king's ear, so to speak. I recognize that the face of change had to come from the company. And this goes right to ISO 55000, where leadership is a key element. And leadership is active participation. And I was very fortunate to have worked with an individual at the time who, Walt Ramsey, who was a fantastic manager. And he was the face of change for the company that I was working at. And when I ended up leaving the Fluor, I was working with different companies doing SAP implementation work. Oh. So I got to see, again, an enterprise system, at least that's what they called it, okay, that dealt with asset management and focused primarily on plant maintenance and on materials management and planning and scheduling. And, but I also got to mix in with system engineering and with FICO and accounting and that. So I got a taste of that. And then I worked with, I did a lot of work previously, in the utility industry. So pretty wide range. So it just came natural. And I used to ask myself, well, why are the changes that I implement still in use, 5, 10 years after I've left the site? Whereas some of the other individuals I've worked with, when they do changes, they last until they leave the site, and then they revert back. And I focused on the change management aspect. And also the other thing to me, if you're going to spend all that money, data integrity was a huge effort. I mean, if you're going to spend all that money on one of these software packages, you better get accurate information in there. And so that was always a key element. And so between that, change management, data integrity, and best practices or leading practices, that was what I've always focused on. And since that time, all the projects I've worked on have been in one element or another of ISO 55000. So in 2008, when I was asked to do some research for a company on EAM, that's when I found PAS 55. And at that time, I joined and I talked the company I was working for into becoming the first corporate sponsor of the IAM. And it was, everybody liked it, but unfortunately 2008 was a bad year for everybody, towards the end. And that company didn't make it, unfortunately. But I stuck with 2000 with the PAS 55, and when it became ISO 55000, I was a big supporter of it, purporter of it, and it was soon after that, after 2014 and 2015, that I went to the IMC conference and met you and a lot of other great people that just reinforced the need for ISO 55000 and reinforced my belief that it was going to be a strong player in asset management going forward. And here I am today.
So I've talked to you a couple times recently, and you really are excited about your new position and your new company. Can you, without being an advertisement, can you tell us a little bit about your new company and why you like it so much?
Well, I accepted a position with EY, Ernst & Young, back in September as a manager in technologies and EAM. And I got to tell you, I've never worked for a company that was so vested in their people and understood that their people was in fact their real asset. And when I look at it, I mean, the first 2 weeks that I was there, I was just awestruck with the talent that I was working with. And, they spent 2 weeks with me in training. All of this is remote these days, but it was convincing me that I belonged there. I've got to tell you, I needed some convincing because these people are really sharp. And I realized that they have a real interest in ISO 55000, and I'm going to be working with them to expand the practice in that area. And
that's exciting.
The thing I really like about this company is, as I go down the list, I really think they could almost certify by themselves. Right now, I think it would not take much to show certification, because when you look at value, alignment, leadership, and assurance, they have it all. And they got it all documented. They got the KPIs, they got everything. So I'm working towards that goal, trying to talk with them about that. But it's a great company to work for. I can't even begin to tell you what about the benefits package, and I won't. But other than I'm real happy with the company.
That's really good. That's really good. I think it's a strong statement in general that a really well-run company is already doing a lot of the things, if not most of the things, that are specified in ISO 55000. It's, like we always tell people, there's no silver bullet in there. It's no, huge aha moment beyond the definition of value. I think the definition of value they use is an aha moment. But not that there is a definition of value.
I was just getting to that,
I thought I'd get you. Yeah, but defining assets in terms of the value they provide instead of treating them like a depreciated cost, really changed the mindsets of organizations. Has that been your experience as well?
Well, as you know, I'm in the work group 4, and we just recently divvied up some of the questions. And one of those areas was, do we need to define value? Well, I had an opposing view. A lot of people would really love to define value because they see it as an unauditable item as it currently is stated. And I look at them and I say, you're right. It is an unauditable item because they're not the ones who should be determining the value. The organization should be determining the value. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and so is value. So, there are some things that would be totally worthless to anybody else. But if that organization thinks it's of value to them, that's all that matters. It's their money. They're the ones that have to spend it to support it. So I don't think it should be up to an auditor to do it. And that's why I don't believe in defining it. But it's going to go out for a vote to all our people out there. And eventually it is going to have an impact on a lot of things, one way or the other.
Yeah, there's been a lot of words written around value in the TC 251 effort, but not ever anything that we could agree on.
That's right.
So I don't know. I mean, there are some people that just, are hard over that we need to have a definition, and say lots of words about it. I think the beauty to me is when you understand something well enough, and understand the concept, but you can make a simple statement about it and it's meaningful.
It's value is the worth it provides to the organization.
Yeah.
Oh, how? Well, is it dollars and cents? Not necessarily. Yes, there's a cost associated with values. All right. But it's the organization that puts the bill on it and not the auditor. And what can an auditor say about value in reality? And I don't recall there being anything specific where you had to say this is providing value, other than you had to look at it. You put KPIs in place to see if your objectives are being achieved. And if they are, fine. If not, well, spend more money. Let's work harder at it.
I got a quote for that. I think in my mind, I just made up this new line. We'll see what you think. But the line that I always is, and I have a math background in probability and statistics, so I got a little chutzpah, whatever, little credentials in that area. But the line that you can't manage what you can't measure always really irritated me. There is some truth to it. It's certainly and the more operationally oriented you get, perhaps maybe it's truer. But my parallel statement is you can't lead what you don't understand.
Yeah, that's a nice little saying. And the thing about value is, in that strategic asset management plan, you're supposed to identify all these objectives. And it's done by top management. So top management needs to explain to everybody. And, when we talk about alignment, it's also about taking into account the shareholders, but not necessarily doing anything about their needs, because their needs could be totally different than your organization's.
Stakeholders.
And you're not. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, stakeholders.
I'm sorry.
Not shareholders, pardon me.
Although they're stakeholders too.
Yeah, they got a stake in it. But you know what? That was one of the other things that we talked about. And some of the questions in the wording of the questions involve stakeholder and doing things for them. And I'm against putting a requirement that you had to adhere to the stakeholders. That's like asking the lumberjack to make sure you don't cut that tree down because there's a spotted owl in it. You know, he has no obligation. Well, he does now because there's federal laws. But the thing is, if he had an option, I doubt he'd be concerned about that spotted owl,
Right.
unfortunately.
His interest is
It's
getting
totally
paid for
different.
cutting a tree down. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, it's a business decision. And that was the other thing, it was built right into the risk matrix there with risk, opportunity versus cost versus value to the organization.
Mhm.
And that is subjective to say the least, but it's a top management decision to make that call and not an auditor's call, so that's just how I felt about it, but
Yeah.
we'll get everybody's opinion on it. And I think it's a cultural thing too,
Yeah.
Those companies in Europe and that are subsidized, that are socialist countries, they can be a lot more favorable towards a stakeholder than a business that has to run here in the US that is reporting back to Wall Street in a lot of ways, So I think that has a lot to do with it. And unless your lawmakers make laws forcing you to do something, if it's not in the law that you have to do something, then, you probably don't. There's a lot of companies that wouldn't adhere to a lot of regulations that we have if they didn't have to. But, that's the good part. That's why there's so many different types of companies out there. And they say, well, why aren't more companies adopting ISO 55000? I think a lot of them are. I think they're using it as a model, though, and not necessarily justifying the cost of certification.
Yeah.
But definitely want to go for the benefit of adhering to it and using it as a model.
Yeah, I totally agree. Certification is not a good criteria. I mean, there's when we were writing the original document, it wasn't written, oh, let's write this so people can get certified. It was, let's write this to advance, the structured approach to asset management, and so organizations can get the value from it. So I think it's an interesting measure, but it's not, the critical measure of, adoption. At our fall event, we had just lots of, and really big organizations, like the U.S. Air Force, pretty big,
Yeah, pretty big.
The Coast Guard, Army Corps of Engineers are all adopting asset management ISO 55000 principles. But certification is like not on their horizon.
Yeah, not necessarily.
So we got a question here that says, Boyd, can you speak to how ISO 55000 can help an enterprise management change in today's world?
How it can make, well, you have to look at ISO 55000 kind of like the master checklist of things that you should be doing. And then you have to utilize leading practices for your industry, within it. Now, the way it might work is depicted off of your initial assessment. I think that initial assessment is probably the most important aspect because it'll tell you where your strengths and your weaknesses are. And let's face it, if your weakness was in leadership, it might promote somebody into a position of leadership that has better leadership skills. or force you to look outside your organization for better people. Or it might force you to come up with a competency requirement, okay, for a certain thing. As you go down, one of the areas, and Rhys Davies talked about this. I just loved how he used to close his talks with saying there's only two things a company really needs to do initially to reap huge benefits and rewards. And he said, at budget time, people are going to be coming with budget proposals, and there's only two questions you need to ask. The first question is, how does your proposal contribute to the organizational objectives? And if you get the deer in the headlights look, you say next. And then he said, you know, and then if they actually come up with a good excuse as to how it's going to contribute to the overall objectives of the corporation, you say, that's great. Now, where is it on the risk matrix? You know? And if you get that deer in the headlights look again, you say next. And he said that'll whittle about 80% of the projects out real quick. And he's right. He said, and at that point, you have done everything to identify all the projects, and you assign a priority to them on which ones benefit the organization the most. And you go down the list because you've got finite dollars unless you're the government. And then you can just print up whatever you need. But, you know, you go down the list until you run out of money and say, well, better luck next year, you know. But they have to understand that at that point, everybody's aligned because they are whatever the objectives are. And everyone knows now that, hey, if I want money for a project, that project has to contribute somehow to the corporate objective. And it has to be, you know, medium to low risk or high reward. Well, yeah, you can take on more risk, but there's got to be a high reward in it. So, and that sets your priorities. And I think that answers the question, I hope.
No, that's good. And it kind of, you know, you got to the question that I was, you know, one of the questions I had in mind is to understand your point of view on risk. And you know, there's another thing there's a big debate on, and not only in TC 251, but all across ISO and more broadly, is everybody has a different definition of risk, with one of the key distinctions being, does risk include opportunity, or is risk distinct from opportunity?
Well, originally, I was like everybody else. When I heard the term risk, it always had a negative connotation. But I learned that, hey, risk is both positive and negative. And as an opportunity, it's an unknown. Okay, and that's all risk is an unknown, essentially. So at that point, there is risk associated with an opportunity. How much risk? Well, how big's the opportunity? You know, and that's how you look at it. And I myself didn't feel a need to change the definition of risk the way we currently have it. And you know, I saw what is it, 33 or 31?
31,000.
31,000. I didn't see a need to, other than, yes, we want you, if you've adhered to that, that's fine. But with respect to asset management, this is how we look at risk. And it's both positive and negative, you know. And this is how we're going to address it within the scope of asset management. And when it comes time to budget time, you know, you've got an opportunity that can benefit our organization, and it's in line with our objectives. By all means, we want to hear about it. If it's positive, it doesn't mean that it isn't going to have risk or that it isn't risk. There's risk associated with everything. So, yeah, I I think we're perfectly fine the way we are. Of course, I'm real comfortable with the existing document. So my whole thing is it was review and change if necessary to improve it. So someone would have to explain to me that they were actually improving the document in the change. And if it didn't improve it, next.
That's good. Well, let's, what about the future? Where do you see your future? You're going to work for another 20 years, or, where do you see the profession going? And, what's your crystal ball show? What's going to happen?
Well, I love being part of a solution team, helping people one way or another. And as long as someone's willing to pay me to do that, I'm ready to do it. I've done it for a lot of years without getting paid. So I really do enjoy what I do. I enjoy working with people and helping them come to some solution, to help them achieve their objectives. And how long I can do it, I really don't know. As long as my health keeps up, and my health is in good shape right now, so I'm excited that EY was willing to accept me as an old geezer to come on board and with the gray beard, So,
Yeah.
But bringing what I have, I want to just provide whatever value I can to whatever organization I can.
Speaking of jobs, I wanted to mention today that I was on LinkedIn today, and I get one of those, LinkedIn, send you too many messages and things.
Yeah.
And one of them was about jobs. And I was interested to see what jobs are available. So I must have clicked something at some time to say, send me information about jobs. But so, a couple times a week, I get an email. And today there was one, and it was from a recruiting firm. And it was for a vice president of asset management. And I thought, oh, that's an impressive title. I wonder if it's a small company. I wonder if they're really talking about, the kind of asset management we're talking about. And it turns out they absolutely were talking about the kind of assets we're talking about. And, it didn't name the company, but big company, lots of locations, in the United
Wow.
States and abroad. And they really want a vice president level person to head their asset management effort. And I thought, okay, now we're talking, huh?
Yeah. $22 an hour. And you yeah, not today, right?
Yeah, no, well, it's better than $8 or $15 an hour.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So, change management. So I was going to get back to that. Just have any other thoughts on change management? Lessons learned, or something you could share of, with people about change management and how you're so successful at it.
Well, a lot of it, I'm going to say that a lot of it had to do with the people I got to work with.
Mhm.
I was very fortunate on all the projects that I've ever worked on. The people were talented, and I truly believe that everybody wants to do a good job. That everybody that wants to do a good job only needs a couple of things. They need a path forward. They need the right tools. They need the right authority to get their jobs done. And, that was the thing that I'm a firm believer in, and I really like the waterfall methodology of project management as opposed to Agile, but Agile has its benefits when you're writing software and having to move quickly. But initially on a project, I like the waterfall methodology and the Stephen Thomas goal achievement model, wherein you have a vision and then you set up about 4 goals, and then you set up about 4 activities that'll satisfy each of the goals, and then you have an action team and you assign KPIs, and by doing so, everybody from top to bottom knows exactly how their contribution is going to contribute at the lowest end. They know how their contribution is going to contribute to satisfying the goal and how that goal is going to satisfy the corporate vision. And I saw that as a direct alignment tool within ISO 55000. And, you know, my role as a project manager was always to remove obstacles. And I always wanted to plan 2 paths forward for any team I had, such that if I hit a roadblock, I could move them over to the other side and continue forward, moving forward always. And give me time to remove the object that was blocking it. And I found that to be very successful. The other thing was you lead people into the answers that you want, into the leading practices, because sometimes they're not aware of them, you know. So you have to pose really good questions to get them to start thinking. And it has to be their decision. That was the other thing. I was pretty good at making it their decision to do something that I wanted them to do. And, you know, that was the key, was to ask the right question. And if you ask the right question, they'd give you the right answer. And then once they decide to do something, they own it. And that was the other thing. They're going to become your champions when they go back into work with their peer group, you know. And typically you get people who are respected by their peers to be on these action teams, so that when they go back, they can be the champion, because everyone likes what they know, that they're the leader, and leadership happens at all levels of an organization. But that's how I handled change management, and making sure I had active participation by everybody in there, and making sure that the person standing up in front of the group worked for the group. They worked for the company, the client. And that always worked out great for me, as opposed to me standing up there telling them, do this, do that. That never works. I'm a contrarian to begin with, so I understood exactly how they felt.
Okay. Well, I think, you know, I think we're actually a little over time. Nick, what are you thinking, Nick?
Yeah, why don't I just thank again our sponsors, and then say, you know, Jim, if you want to offer any closing thoughts, or Boyd, we can certainly do that. But you know, like you said, we are in overtime already.
Well, thanks, Nick. And any further? I thought those were pretty good closing words of wisdom you already had, Boyd. But you have anything else you'd like to add today?
No, the only thing I would say is that I would recommend highly that if a company does have interest in ISO 55000, to definitely educate themselves on the topic, and to seek certification through the ALN and the IAM, and with the GFMA. All of them offer very good training and work within their organizations. So by all means, seek out the education that you need, and good luck.
Great. Well, thank you, Boyd, for joining us. It's good to have we haven't seen each other a while, but it's good to have this opportunity just to chat. And a good example, like we might if we were having an adult beverage at the end of the day after a conference or work engagement.
Sounds like a good plan to me.
I think I'll do that next. It's a beautiful day.
I got about an hour and a half left before I'm going to be in by.
Oh, that's right. You actually have a regular job. I just do consulting.
Yeah. Yeah. It is nice. And I'd like to say hello to Mike while I see he's on there. So hello, Mike.
He hasn't shown his face.
Hi, Boyd. It was great to hear you and see you, and thanks for the recommendations for the training.
That's great.
Appreciate that. And I'll be approaching you. We need to talk in 2022 about making EY an ALN member.
I'm already working on it, buddy.
Thank you.
All righty. You have a great
That'd be
day.
great. Okay, thanks,
All right.
everybody, and thanks for everybody that participated today and asked questions. We'll look through the chat. If there was something that we could respond to that we missed, we'll try to catch up on that.
All righty.
And thanks, Boyd. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Mike.